Hi, this is Alicia Bowling with Creative Laughter TV Beyond Logic podcast. Today our guest is a professional astrologer, psychic, and tarot advisor. She has helped individuals and business owners make decisions to help better understand themselves and the people in their lives. Her predictions have been spot on with celebrities and worldly events, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Kathy Biehl. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Alicia.
So I'm super excited to interview you because astrology is on everybody's lips, but it's on everybody's lips in a very bizarre way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So before we get into that, I kind of want to ask you, like, how did this all start for you? Were you born a psychic? Was this something that you developed later in life? And where did the astrology come in at?
I suspect that I was a little empath and a sensitive, but I didn't think of the world in that way. When I was really young, I was someone who wanted to live off in a fantasy world, preferred it there. By junior high or so, I started working my way through all the books I could get my hands on in the library that were topics that we would now call esoteric. And I'll have to say that doing spells was the first thing that attracted me. I thought, it'll be really fun to be able to really do magic. But that gradually led me into all kinds of different divination devices. And in high school, I got fairly seriously into teaching myself the tarot. My mother gave me a deck quite unexpectedly one day after school that was called the Aquarian Tarot. It's quite gorgeous, and she got it because I'm an Aquarian. So I taught myself that, and about the same time, my reading had me stumbling on astrology, and that just absolutely fascinated me. I love geometry too, which worked out really nicely. So this is about the time that Linda Goodman was really popularizing astrology in the mainstream. So I devoured her book, Sun Signs, and that inspired me to write a column for my school newspaper in the Bible Belt, mind you, and I really do say, I point this out all the time because there's levels of miracles occurred here. But I wrote a column, I was one of the editors of the paper, and I wrote a column every issue about whatever sign was having its birthday then, and would put the people from the school in it who were part of it. I was given an astrological guide for graduation from my assistant. And then it wasn't until my mid-20s when I stopped practicing law with a law firm and went to astrology school that I got really, really deeply into it. But one aside, I put all this on hold pretty much when I was in college and law school. And it was when I was studying for the bar exam, when the logical part of my mind was the most occupied, that the intuitive end started erupting. I had numerous precognitive dreams about stuff that came true within days, which was nothing I'd ever experienced before. And at that point, reading cards went back into my life on a daily basis, and then I just picked up the astrology books again.
Yeah, speaking of cards, I have to back it up for a second because that's a very odd present for a parent to give a child unless they're psychic themselves or the kid talked about it all the time, right?
No, well, she knew I was into esoteric stuff, but my mother is a visual artist, and she saw this, and they're beautiful cards. It's an Art Nouveau deck, and the first edition of it, the colors are perfect. The later editions, the reds turned into crappy salmon colors and oranges and stuff that don't work as well. So there was that aspect.
Only an artist daughter would say that, by the way. That's cute.
Oh, yeah. Right. I don't know. Probably if you asked her, she would either have no memory of it or no rational explanation for it.
So the whole astrology thing, let's get into that for a second. So when people print out, they can go on and get free astrology charts or whatever they do, and you have the circle, and then they have all these interpretations, like it's mind-blowing. It's like it's hard for the basic person to understand. So how would a regular person who's just curious about it but doesn't know anything about it, how would they even interpret that? Could they?
Well, there are some sites that will explain some of the aspects of it to you, but that chart, the big circle with the pi wedges in it, is essentially a depiction of what was in the sky when you were born. This is why people ask what time you were born, because the time sets the line that goes from the 9 o'clock position to the 3 o'clock position. That represents the horizon, and everything that's above that in the chart was something that was actually visible in the sky when you were born, and everything that is below that line in the chart was below the horizon when you were born. Now, you're going to say, what if I don't know when I was born? Well, you can cast a chart a lot of different ways, and one of them is to simply put your sun sign in the 9 o'clock position and then let everything go counterclockwise from that.
So also a question to ask you. So like, let's say you live in California and you move to New York. So does that change the energy and the astrological structure of what's about to go down for you? Is like your energy could be better, let's say here in New York than it was in California. Or if you move to France and you're in a whole different kind of time zone, does that change things for you as well?
You've actually asked a number of different things here without probably realizing it. The first thing is your birth chart stays with you regardless. That's your basic wiring. You can relate to different parts of the planet differently. It's possible to relocate your chart and then see how things are. You can also use something called astrolocality. The trademark version of it is astrocartography, where you see how the lines in your birth chart actually interact on the globe, and people will make decisions about where they're going to go, live, whatever, based on that. So, yeah, your basic personality is the same. There are some things that may play out more easily for you in other spots on the globe than where you were born, or with more difficulty.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. So I have this conversation all the time with my friends personally about your rising, your moon, your sun, because they're always saying, well, I'm not like this, I'm more like this, or I'm like this. Is it possible like your main sign, you could be similar to that, but you're more like your rising sign or you're more like your sun sign? Or do they all kind of correlate to make one personality?
Well, it's actually a mix of both, because there are lots of different factors in a chart, and the rising sign is what someone's going to see when they first meet you. Your sun sign is your core personality. Your moon sign is your soft, gooey inner center, which for some people is never visible, and for some people it's just right there in your face from the beginning. And if there are other planets in the same sign as, or making aspects to, having conversations with the rising sign, the moon, or the sun, that's going to affect it. So, for example, in my case, my sun is something that people understand once they find out about it, but they really experience my moon sign. I have a lot of fire in my chart, and that's what people first see. So it goes by person to person.
So like when say, oh, people are very funny with this. They say, oh, well, I could never date that sign. We don't get along. That always cracks me up, because isn't it based on different elements? If you get along, you could be the same sign, but if you have different rising, different moons, they could be compatible. So is that a myth?
Well, it's just an oversimplification of what's going on. Yeah, there are some sun signs that get on better than others, but there are many factors in a chart to look at when you're looking at compatibility, and the sun sign is just part of it. I find that communication and emotional factors are much more of an indicator of whether people are going to get along or not.
Oh, interesting. And what do you think about this whole thing about they're moving the signs? Like all of a sudden, like I'm a Libra, so now I'm not a Libra, I'm a Scorpio. And I am nothing like a Scorpio.
This is a misconstruing of what's going on, and every couple of years it makes its way around the internet. It has nothing to do with what Western astrology actually does. The Western astrological system is based on, it uses signs that are based on the constellations that are in the sun's path. So people are going to say, oh, there's this 13th sign. Well, no, there's not. there's a 13th constellation that's kind of in the circle, but the sun doesn't cross through it. It's not part of the picture. So if people want to, there are some very detailed explanations of this. I have two different articles at my site, one under Astro Insight articles and then one under the About Me pages. I talked to the New York Times about this several years ago. But again, really seriously, just all you have to do is go to a search engine and type in, has my sun sign changed? And you're going to get easily 15, 20, 25 different astrologers saying no and explaining why.
So what's the difference between Western and Vedic astrology? Are there more than those two?
There are a lot more than those. There are many, many systems. Vedic has a different approach to the houses, and it uses a different zodiac. Vedic astrology is about 23 degrees ahead, behind. It's 23 degrees different than Western. So I am the sign before mine in Vedic astrology. They have very different ways of approaching things. There are numerous systems, and anyone who has dealt with any kind of divination method knows that information can be accurate coming in a variety of formats. It's just a question of what you know and how you work with it.
So how does somebody decide which one is the best one for them? Is it just a kind of luck of the draw type deal, or?
Well, some people resonate more one way or another. And I know some people that straddle the fence. At one point, I tried to learn Vedic, and it's so different than what I'm used to. I'd just rather explore the endless rabbit hole that is Western astrology. There's enough variation in that as well. So, most people start out with a pretty normal Western astrologer, and then they can kind of go this way or that way and see what feels best. The people who love Vedic just stick with it. I mean, that particular system comes up with cures, things that you can do, jewels or gemstones that you can wear to try to offset seemingly negative transits. It's a very different approach.
So what do you think of the horoscope in the paper? Like, this is so funny to me because people always go, oh, that's not me at all. But the paper would not apply to everybody because it's generalized, right?
Yeah, what they do is, because I've written those before, there's such little information that can actually go into it. And it is, it's very across the board. And there are some people, like the more information, there are certain people that will do sun sign horoscopes online that are actually quite in depth, and there'll be some stuff that will apply to you regardless. But if you go to a site or you pick up a periodical that has like 3 sentences, that's just way too succinct. It's more for entertainment than for actual navigational guidance.
Right. So I have this friend, Scott, and he cracks me up. We have these fights over him being an Aquarius. He's insisting Aquarius is a water sign. And I keep telling him, no, Aquarius is an air sign with water elements. Could you please explain? This is just for Scott out there because he's driving me crazy with this. Will you please explain to him that Aquarius is an air sign?
First off, Aquarius is an air sign and it's very fixed. It knows something and it hangs on to it. So I understand this. I have run into this before. It does not have water elements. Water elements in astrology actually refers to a particular quality. If you can use that phrase, Aquarius is the water bearer. The symbol is a human holding a vase that it's pouring down onto all of humanity. And this represents the Aquarian progressive or humanitarian brotherhood of man bent that goes with it. But trust me, if you're hurt and you have a boo-boo and you go to an Aquarian, you are not going to get a water response. You will get an air response.
Oh, interesting. Water would be more nurturing, right?
Yeah, water might go, oh, poor baby. Aquarius, there's any number of things Aquarius will do. That's not one of them.
Yes. No, I can definitely tell you that is not one of them. So the whole thing with Mercury retrograde is scary to everyone. And when everyone hears Mercury retrograde, they're like, oh my God, buckle down the hatchets because my computer's going to break, my refrigerator's going to break. Like, it's just a nightmare. Typically, I find. But also, doesn't it affect different signs differently? Like, the retrograde could be going through somebody's sign in a different way. Because I remember once I was traveling and it was going through my travel sector. And let me tell you something, that trip made me never want to travel again. Ever. So can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I actually have a collection of Mercury retrograde hate notes of images that I've been collecting and that I have been sent. And one of them is a screenshot of my phone with a text from my sister that just is a series of bombs and images of phones and computers and hate symbols and skull and crossbones. And it's this I hate Mercury retrograde. And it goes on for the entire phone screen. So I sometimes will post that. Just to explain, Mercury is the planet that rules how we talk, our information flow, and how we get around. Think of the cosmic messenger, the messenger of the gods, the guy with the little wings on his hat, wings on his feet. So when Mercury is retrograde, it's an optical illusion. The planet looks like it's traveling backwards when viewed from the sun, but it's because of a change in our comparative orbital speed. So it is similar to when you're on the highway and you pass somebody and you speed up and you're going 20 miles an hour faster than that person. You look in your rearview mirror and that car looks like it's falling way behind you. It's an optical illusion. So when Mercury goes retrograde, it tends to have us have to go back over or stop, look, and listen. And it can be extraordinarily irritating. And it stresses things that have been unclear or that have flaws in them. So technology tends to go really fluid. This particular Mercury retrograde put my Mac in a coma. I'm not happy with that. Anyway, so here's how it affects different people. It goes retrograde in different signs each time, and there's usually like 3, sometimes 4 retrograde periods a year, and it tends to be retrograde for 2.5 to 3 weeks. So if you're going to run around and say the sky is falling, well, then that's basically saying you're going to spend like a fourth of the year in bed, which might be that's one way to handle this. So it's always it's retrograde in a different sign, and it will be in a different part of your chart or interacting with each individual differently each time. So some retrogrades may be easy peasy for you, and others may be like your travel story.
So how do people find out if it's traveling through their sign and how it affects them? Would they have to go to astrologer to get that information?
Or they need to do a little research. I have an article up every year on navigating Mercury retrograde that year, and it actually says where it's going to be retrograding. So it gives the signs and the degree and the time frame, and if you can take that and drop it into your chart, that will give you some pointers. And this is always linked to at my site, and it tends to be published at OMTimes, OMTIMES.com.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So there are ways of figuring some stuff out without hiring an astrologer.
So how does astrology help with like marriages and businesses and like maybe a partnership or a relationship? I know that you can actually do comparison charts and see what you would be up against. How helpful is astrology with that?
Looking at the interactions between charts, when I do this, I can show people where things flow easily and where they have differences in the way they approach life so that they can use this as a guideline for making bridges and stuff. And I will also point out where there are challenges that are going to be tricky and things to watch for and different ways of playing the energy out. And one underlying theme of that is we tend to have our way of doing things and then always try to force that onto the other person. And when you know how somebody else is wired, you can pitch things more in their language, and there's a much better chance that you're going to work a common ground. And the same thing goes with a business partnership, planning when you want to launch something, who's going to have what responsibilities. I had one business client who had me doing forecasts or evaluations for each of the key people he was bringing on board, which turned out to be extremely interesting and useful in a lot of ways.
Yeah, even coming down to signing contracts. I mean, isn't there times where you say, ooh, not during that period of time, don't sign that contract?
Oh, yeah, no, you can use astrology to pick when to do something, or in most cases, it's ruling out the times that really would be self-sabotaging or disadvantageous. in most cases, it's like getting rid of what's really horrible and then deciding with what's left what will work. But it is possible. It is possible to pick something that looks just really, really good. Occasionally, when I'm picking wedding charts, and also a friend has had me doing various things for. This is the aging client population. As one joint needed to be worked on after another, I've been picking times for various things. And for next year is really tricky, and it took me into May before I found a beautiful time frame that fit all of her needs. So,
oh yeah, I won't have any surgeries done if I don't know. If I can get the doctor's information, I try to get his too. I think that's so important. So much could go wrong, I feel.
Sometimes you can't plan these things. There are certain types of surgeries that you don't have a lot of leeway with. It might be an emergency situation, or it could be that the type of surgery is only done on certain days at certain times. So with that, it really is narrowing down, just avoiding what could be a disaster.
So let's get into a little fun talk here. I don't know if it's fun, but it's sure crazy, that's for sure. What the heck do you think about all these sexual allegations with Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, Dustin Hoffman? Do you feel like this could be their demise? Like, is there something going on planetarier-wise that's going to drag all these people down? Or do you feel like they're going to come out smelling like roses because of who they are?
No, we're in a really interesting transformational mode. This has an awful lot to do with the planet Jupiter moving into the sign of Scorpio in October now. Now, Jupiter is in this sign every 12 years. Scorpio is the area of life that's the stuff that we like to keep hidden, that we don't like to talk about in public. It's big money, it's power, it's sexuality. There are other... Without getting into the technicality, there's a convergence going on right now that is bringing a feminine revelatory spirit into this. And I will mention that in November. So this started in October. Actually, there are a number of things that I would say that the current eclipse cycle that we're in also is doing this for baby boomers and all of these men. Justin Hoffman's a little older than that, but all of them are being affected by the eclipses. There was such a big to-do at the end of August about this total solar eclipse. That's part of this as well, hitting the reset button. But I will mention that in, I think it was in early November, at some point in November, Jupiter had a conjunction with an asteroid that is not normally used much in astrological forecasting, but when I saw it, I thought it was hysterical, and that is an asteroid named Karma. So there is an element going on now of, and there are numerous other factors that are bringing this to the surface, that's pulling rot up that's been down there for a very, very long time. Each of these three men has a difficult path ahead of him. Each of them has a lot of answering to do, and the story is not over at all for the three of them. Weinstein may have something fairly unexpected, if that is actually possible, happening in about 2 years. But there's much more to come out about him. Kevin Spacey, same thing. He has major reckoning over the next year, which always brings with it the possibility for redemption, but we'll see. And both Dustin Hoffman and Kevin Spacey had something come to a head in August that pretty much led to these revelations. Dustin Hoffman has about another 2-year journey in this whole issue as well. So we're not out of the woods. There will be more and more.
So do you think these men are going to be able to? Well, I don't think Harvey Weinstein can. I mean, he's going down the way I'm looking at it. But are these gentlemen going to be able to regroup and get their careers back, or whatever the case may be? Or is this pretty much their downfall?
With Kevin Spacey, the next year, how he deals with stuff is going to decide that. He's about to have his Saturn return. Saturn's the planet of ramifications, responsibility. I've been calling it the planet of adulting. And it's coming back to where it was when he was born over the next year. It's going to go back and forth across it, and that's a time for answering for a lot of things.
What do you feel about Harvey?
There's a lot more to come out. There's a terrific amount more to come out, and August of next year is going to be really, really pivotal for how he chooses to play this out. And it may take a number of years before he has the real sense of finality about it. I mean, it's entirely probable that extremely long jail time is in the future for him.
Wow, I can see that. And what about Dustin? He's so well liked, and it's such a shame that this is coming out. Even like when I heard it, I was like, oh.
In about 2 years, he stands a chance to really remake himself and redeem himself in some way. I mean, he's the one that has kind of like the best possible prognosis out of this.
So tell us about your astrology hub.
Oh, actually, that's the site that I am associated with. I am one of the writers for it. It is a really beautiful site, astrologyhubcom, that has all kinds of programs and lots of writing, much of which is by me. It's got this. It has the
shout out.
It has the mission of desensationalizing astrology for the mainstream. So it's really targeted to people who are learning more about it or want to use it in ways to make their life more meaningful or flow better. There are a lot of different programs. They have multiple Facebook groups that do different things. And a lot of their stuff is free, and so you can try out things and find people that you like or don't like. The people who run it are not astrologers, and they have had their lives really, really change because of starting to learn about this and following it. And it's a real woman power kind of site as well. Even though, I mean, men are perfectly welcome there, but man, if you're
did you hear that, men?
But if you would like to find really fun ways to play with archetypes or to learn ways that you can be happier in your life, this site has zillions of tools and programs for that, some of which, again, cost nothing.
Oh, cool. So that's astrologyhub.com?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, Kathy, let's end this with a bang. Let's hear your next 3 years predictions.
We're moving into a time of getting very, very serious about what your personal goals are, and across the board, personal bottom line. And there will be a big tussling with the role that we give authority to somebody else or responsibility over us to somebody else. So we're in massive institutional and political restructuring across the globe, although for the U.S., this is really, really strong. So people are going to find that they'll be pressed. It's going to feel like we're running a marathon. Okay, so think of the difference between how you deal with a marathon and how you deal with a sprint. With a sprint, you can just go and then fall down and drink a bunch of water and regroup. With a marathon, you have to keep pacing yourself, knowing that, this is not going away for a while. So everyone's going to kind of... we're going to have to all make friends with Saturn. I have an article about this. All make friends with Saturn and taking responsibility for your own personal grounding, your own personal infrastructure and foundations, and doing things step by step by step. So there's what this is going to force everyone to do is to set long-term concrete goals and then take very tiny steps toward them and rest and find the solidness inside yourself, because the insanity out in the world isn't going to really go away for a while. So there's a lot of stuff. The Me Too movement is just part of it. There's a lot of stuff that's been brewing below the surface that's coming out, and think of it as an infection that has been raging, that low-level infection that the antibiotics didn't knock out. And you have to kind of let it come out and run its course and let the sunlight get to it. So that kind of stuff is still going to be going on. We're not going to just suddenly wake up and have life the way it used to be. That's But instead,
Right.
looking at what is in your world and what you can keep calm and clean and clear and work toward. This means a lot less fluff, a lot less chatter, a lot less spending your time on things that don't really matter. It is a much more immediate way of living and doing things that either are going to get you somewhere that has value to you or that you enjoy in the moment. So everything's like our scope of vision is going to come down really tight.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us. I mean, really appreciate it. She's fantastic. If you want to book a reading or learn more about Kathy, go to her website, www.empowermentunlimited.net. Also, don't forget to check our website out for our group sessions with your favorite intuitives. And remember, you create your life, you create your future. This is Alicia Bowling with Beyond Logic.